Hey guys, welcome to this video. I am Sophie Shohet and I'm wearing, by the way, I'm wearing this outfit, not the scarf, but I'm wearing this outfit because I'm going to go to the gym after, and if I wear this outfit it makes me go. Like if I put on my normal clothes I won't go, so that's why I'm wearing this. I am going to tell you about something that happened to myself and my family when I was a kid. I've always been reticent about telling anyone. In fact, like, pretty much no one knows. Like, only our close family really know about it, because strangely enough we don't want to tell people because people will think that you're making it up or you're strange. But I just want to start by saying that we're all normal, we're not nuts. In fact, my family, particularly like one of my sisters is like very academic, very science, doesn't believe in anything, is kind of, you know, like we're all just kind of like, if it can't be explained, we don't want to know, but we just, before this happened, we never believe in ghosts, okay? Like, that's the thing. So what happened was, I'm going to take you back to when I was 10 years old, and this was like the mid-90s, 94, 95. I was 10, my other sister was 8, and my little sister was 6. We had just moved house, and my parents had wanted this house so badly. It was in the same village, it was just up the road from where we were living. This house was in like major demand. It was on a very big piece of land. It was a bungalow, but there was room to either knock it down and put something bigger on it, or to extend this existing bungalow and put like an upstairs on it or whatever. The only downside was that whoever bought it had to take the contents of the previous people who had lived in it, their stuff. So to explain, turns out 2 old ladies had lived in it before. They were sisters. They'd never got married, like they'd never found love. It was really, really sad. They'd never found love, they'd never had families, and they had bought this house together and just lived in it together. And then they got through to old age, and they'd been put into nursing homes several years before the house sold, and then they passed away. Because they had no one to leave the house to, the house went up for sale, and it was just like, you've got to take their stuff. And it was weird. I'm going to show you some photos. These aren't original photos, but they're really freaking close to what this place looked like. So if you imagine, the house was built in the 1950s, and these 2 ladies had bought it when it was first built. They had never modernised it. It had the original 1950s canary yellow kitchen, the original kitsch pink bathroom, hideous sitting room, like wooden floor, and they'd like nailed rugs to the floor. Very strange, like really, like a really ancient old TV, old radio. The whole place was painted pink, and there were like pictures on the wall, and when we moved the pictures, and the pictures were like of, you know, back in the day people used to get those black and white photos taken and they looked like they were dead, and I don't know whether they were or not. There was all that kind of thing. And when we moved the pictures, there were actual like grey black squares around the pictures where they'd been up so long. Their beds were still in there, and they were pristinely made. It was like a time warp, this place. I do remember feeling kind of creeped out in the house, and that wasn't because there was other people's stuff in it. If anything, that fascinated me as a child. But I do remember feeling that the house was a bit creepy, but I didn't dwell on it because I'm 10 and I need to fight my sisters for the best bedroom, and there's just like a whole load of stuff going on. But I do remember when I think back to it, I was like, yeah, it's a bit creepy. Around about the same time, my mum is like, children, I've got some good news. We're gonna get a puppy. And we were so excited because we'd always had hamsters and budgies, but we'd never had a cat or a dog. So we get this little puppy. This is him. He was a West Highland Terrier called Angus. Cutest little thing I've ever known in my life. I loved him so much. So he comes to live with us. We've been in the house about 2-3 months. And the first thing we noticed, 10 o'clock every single night, you would hear the footsteps, the sound of someone walking from the kitchen, down the corridor, past the front door, past the bathroom, and then down the corridor towards the bedrooms. We'd hear these footsteps, and at the same time you'd hear the light switch go, because there was like a light switch so you could turn all the lights off in the hallway. You'd hear the sound of the light switch. Nothing ever happened to the lights, like if they were on they'd stay on, but every single night we'd hear this. You couldn't even deny it. It was like plain as day. And even the dog used to sometimes he'd be like, you know when dogs like tilt their head, like they're like, what is that? He'd like walk off and go and investigate, and he'd come back, and it would just be like the creepiest thing. So one day my parents have a couple of their friends over for dinner. We've all gone to bed. My mum was telling me this story after the event. She said that they'd had dinner and then they retired to the sitting room to have some drinks and just like chat and stuff like that. And my mum said that they're sat there and this thing happens. Like you can hear the other side of the wall, like from the sitting room, you could hear someone walking down the corridor, and then you heard the light switch go, and then it fell silent. And my mum's friend said, oh, is one of the kids up? And my mum was like, no. My mum's friend was so convinced, she was like, no, I've just heard someone walk down the corridor, let me go and check on them. So my mum was like, fine, be my guest. She goes and checks on us, she comes back, she's like, they're all asleep. So that was the first thing that started happening. And there were various other little bits and pieces. Like one day you'd be sat in the sitting room and you'd hear like a noise, like somebody had got up from a chair, and the door to the sitting room would just open. You couldn't do it, okay? It's like if I went over and pulled on the door like that, it wouldn't open. It would, but this thing, like without pushing the handle down. But when this used to happen, the door just used to really like slowly just come open. Like you'd hear it click and it would just come away. And it was like they'd opened it, but you wouldn't see the door handle move, and you couldn't open this door unless you pushed the handle down. So that was the other strange thing. And again, the dog would always sit up and look, like, and he'd be like that, as whatever it was walked out the room, or whatever you think that is. I don't know. There, loads and loads of weird shit was going on. Most of it we ignored until I got to about 15. So my other sister's 13, and then my little sister's probably like 10. So my middle sister, in the middle of all this happening, my dad has converted the old dining room into be her bedroom. And the one thing that he hasn't done at this point is there was a hatch, a serving hatch. This is a creepy thing, and it's nothing to do with ghosts, it's just a weird 50s thing. This is what a serving hatch looks like, and it's not the one from the house. It's basically a little square hole that they used to put in the wall between the kitchen and the dining room, and it had little wooden doors on it that opened out so that whoever was in the kitchen could put the food through, and whoever was in the dining room could take the food. It's weird as hell. That was still there. My dad needed to brick it up, but there was doors on it, so she used to keep it closed. My middle sister, she was always very academic, she's very science. She doesn't, as I mentioned earlier, she doesn't buy into anything paranormal. She would be the first person to laugh in your face if you said anything. But she started complaining to my parents that at 3 in the morning she would be woken up, and she couldn't put her finger on what had woken her up, but she felt like she was being stared at, like close up. Like the way she described it, she was like, I wake up suddenly 3 in the morning and I feel like someone is staring in my face. A couple more years go on. By this point, I'm like 17, 18. I've just started uni. Just before I go to uni, the footsteps that we used to hear down the corridor at 10 o'clock every night have progressed into something that's a lot more audible, and it goes on pretty much all through the night. And around about the same time, my parents got another puppy. It was another West Highland Terrier. We called him Hugo. He's still alive. He's really, really cute. And he used to sleep under my parents' bed with Angus at night. So, okay, just to explain, we've got this L-shaped corridor, and the bit where the bedrooms lead off. So it's like this. My bedroom's down here, my mum and dad's bedroom is here, my little sister's is here, and then there's the bathroom here, and then there's that bit that goes off down there to the kitchen and the dining room and the sitting room and outside and all the rest of it. Hugo got into this habit of standing at the threshold of my parents' bedroom, because they used to sleep with their door open, and it was like the middle of the night, and he used to really aggressively growl and like be staring down the corridor towards my bedroom door. And at the exact same time, the more audible footsteps that I mentioned to you, it sounded like, we had wooden floors, and it sounded like someone shuffling. It sounded like someone wearing slippers, and they were like shuffling slowly, but they were slowly like shuffling backwards and forwards down this corridor. And they'd like walk up the corridor to my parents' room, turn back, walk back again, loiter outside my room, and honestly, like, there were some nights I'd hear it getting closer, and I'd go and quickly open my bedroom door and there'd be nothing there. But you'd be lying in bed and like you didn't just hear it, you sensed it. That was the weird thing. And most of the time my heart was racing, I was sweating like anything. But Hugo started to really be aggressive towards whatever this thing was. He'd stand, as I say, at my parents' door, he'd look down the corridor, and for anyone who's had a dog, you know when they sense danger or something bad's happening and they're growling, they're showing their teeth, like their shoulders are up and they're almost like shaking, they're so growling and barking at the same time. He used to do that as you'd be hearing this noise. And as it used to walk towards my bedroom, like my parents' bedroom, Hugo would start backing up and then he'd run under their bed, hide, and then when he got his confidence up, he'd come back out again and he'd start doing it. And we couldn't shut him up. There was no end to it, and I remember being really tired at the time. We all were. We'd all be at school, and like my dad used to have to try and go to work, and we were all exhausted because we couldn't get a good night's sleep. We just simply couldn't. And the worst thing was we couldn't tell anyone about this because people don't get it, and they wouldn't believe you. And we didn't know who to call. Like, Ghostbusters don't exist. What do you do about that sort of thing? I have come back from university after my first year and I'm staying at home for the summer. This kind of shuffling footstep thing is still going on, and as I say, you'd hear the floorboards creak as it would like walk up and down. And I get into bed like one night. My bed used to be up against the wall, and I used to like sleep. I used to like tuck into bed and I'd face the wall and I'd go to sleep like on my side. And this one night I was half awake, half asleep, and I felt someone, it was like someone slowly trying to sit on the edge of my bed, like at the bottom. And it's like they were deliberately trying not to wake me, because they didn't just sit down, they were like slowly like that. But I could feel the bed like tipping in that direction, and also because like I was on my side, I could hear the springs in the mattress kind of going like they would if someone was actually sitting on the bed. I woke up in a split second, was like, what? As I woke up and sat up, I felt the edge of the bed like ping up, like they just jumped off. And I put my light on, and I was like, I did question whether I dreamt it. But if you can imagine, it's been over 6 years living with a whole load of weird stuff going on. I got to a point where I'd have believed anything by that point. I was like, I could have dreamt that, but I could also not have dreamt that because of everything else that's going on. Incidentally, while this is happening, Hugo is still, like a year on, he's still doing that growling, barking thing down the corridor. I go back to sleep, and again, just as I'm half asleep, half awake, you know, like when you're just about drifting off, it does it again. And I wake up again and I feel blatantly the edge pop back up again. By this point, I'm like really fucking shitting myself. And I didn't know what to do. And I specifically remember that night clearly as anything, and I will never ever forget what happened. Hugo had really started picking up. He was growling so aggressively down the corridor, but he wouldn't walk into the corridor. And I opened my door after all this happened, because I was like, well, I can't go back to sleep again. I opened my door and I looked down the corridor, and he was looking down the corridor, but he didn't, weirdly, when I opened my door, he didn't look up at me. He was looking at something that was almost closer to him than it was me. Get back into bed. Takes a bit of time, but I fall asleep again. And again, I'm half awake, half asleep. You know, that kind of just as you're drifting off. And this thing does it a third time. And I thought, okay, even though this is really fucking scary, I need to know if I'm nuts and I'm imagining this, or if this is real. So I don't move, and I stay half awake, half asleep. And the thing like whatever it is, I feel the mattress, like there's someone sat there now. And the next thing I feel is the duvet that's over me here. I feel like someone's lifting it. And as I feel they're lifting it, icy cold air from where they're lifting it goes down my back. Like, you know, like the air, because they've lifted it up. And I woke, at that point I thought, I'm not imagining it. And I woke up, and it all happened in a split second. I woke up, and as I sat up, the entire duvet, which was tucked down the side of my bed, which is against the wall, the entire duvet in the darkness got completely ripped off my bed. Like it came off my bed. And I turned on the light and the duvet was over the other side of the room, over a TV I had in there, like a widescreen TV. I couldn't have thrown that duvet if I'd been stood on my bed and I already had it off the bed and I tried to throw it like that. I couldn't have got it to have gone over the other side of the room. Like, I had quite a big room and this TV was massive. I certainly couldn't have done it half asleep at night, lying on my side. I couldn't have done it. I ran, I put the light on, and I sprinted down that corridor to my parents' room, and I was just hysterical, because this is the point where when you're hearing footsteps, you can convince yourself that you're imagining it. Even though you kind of, by this point, I knew I wasn't, but I could convince myself I was imagining it. Now, because something actual physical had happened, I couldn't disbelieve it anymore. There was no explanation for what had just happened. Like, I went and told my parents. I was so upset, and my dad came to my room and checked, and he like looked in my wardrobe, he looked under my bed, like just in case there was like someone in my room. There was no one in there. And he saw with his own eyes the duvet, and he like, I don't make stuff up. I'm not gonna stage some big elaborate duvet throwing over this other side of the room thing to get attention. I'm like 18 by this point. The rest of that night I didn't sleep. I sat in my room with my light on, I watched TV. What then happened was my parents called a family meeting, and they, for the first time in years, they kind of admitted, they were like, I think we all know there's something really weird in this house, and it's got beyond a point where we can just ignore it. It's got to a point where it's keeping us all up at night and we're all really distressed about it. And the worst thing is that we can't tell anyone, because people won't believe us, or they'll think it's weird, or they'll just won't want to stay over here or whatever. So the thing they decided to do was my mum was like, let's call a priest in. My mum goes to the local church and she talks to this priest there and explains what's going on, and he was really good. He didn't like laugh, he didn't disbelieve. He made an appointment and he came over to the house, and what he did was he pretty much went into like each room and he said like a prayer, like to the degree of move on, you know, that kind of thing. After this happened, things actually did get a bit better. They didn't go away. We still experienced, you could still hear this shuffling thing down the corridor, but the big stuff stopped, and my sister, for the first time in years, said that she could sleep at night, like soundly through the night. My parents did have to get him back a second time because the thing in the corridor was still being weird, and he came back a second time. That was in 2002, and my parents still live in that house now, and there is nothing that ever went on after that. There's nothing that goes on now. I do still think about what happened there a lot, and I try and rationalise it, and I try and work out what it could have been. I really don't know. My parents don't like talking about it. My mum's kind of thing is, when I really push her on it, I'm like, how did you feel when all this was going on, and what were you thinking, and what did you and Daddy think it was? She's like, I don't want to talk about it because maybe talking about it brings it back in again. And she was like, so I don't want to talk about it, I don't want to remember it. I just want to be able to get on with my life and live in this house and not have anything going on. Even my sisters don't really talk about it. It was a really, really scary time. And I was desperate to share this story because it is just so weird and unexplained. And I guess interesting for anyone who's interested in it. It is interesting. And I just really wonder what it was. I really, really wonder what it was. But anyway, for anyone, I would really love to hear from anyone who has had similar experiences, like unexplained experiences. So I would love it if you would leave in the comments below anything that you've gone through as well, because when you go through this, you can feel quite isolated with it, and you can feel like, you know, I want to tell people my story, but I don't, because people will disbelieve, and that's the worst thing, is like when you're going through something really real and people don't believe you, that's the worst thing, because you've got to go home and sleep with that shit. Do you know what I'm saying? So please share with me your experiences. If you've got any questions, I'll happily answer them. Like I've tried to include as much detail as I can, so this video is quite long. But I hope that you have found this insightful. If you are going through this at the moment, I don't want to say don't be scared, because it is quite scary, but the whole priest thing really did actually help. It really did. So yeah, so I hope that it's been helpful. Thank you for watching. Please give me the thumbs up and subscribe, and I will see you next week on Wednesday. See you later.